Everyone's built a Phase 90 clone, but almost no one gets it right. Today I'm going to be building a Fuzzdog pedals kit and trying to achieve that Eddie Van Halen swir. I'm going to show you some simple mods that you can do to this kit at home to achieve that awesome tone. Stick around to the end and you're going to hear this pedal before distortion, like Mr. Eddie Van Halen does it. You'll also get a super mod that changes this pedal from the script logo version that Eddie would have used to the block logo version, which is a more modern pedal. This is what we're going to be using today. We've got our Fuzzdog pedal kit. These are fantastic. Fuzzdog's a UK company that makes pedal kits. I can't recommend them enough. They really do make some fantastic kits. If you're a beginner and you want to build your own pedal, I highly recommend them. Now, they do offer their own enclosures, which are fantastic. They drill them out. They fit the kits perfectly. However, for me, I wanted to make it a bit more Hello Sailor, so I went with this. It's one of my sloped enclosures. I've painted it in shell pink and then done some Fiesta red Eddie Van Halen style paintwork, all nitrocellulose lacquer. And of course, we got the Hello Sailor pin up on there, holding my favourite guitar, well, a representation of my favourite guitar, my Gibson Melody Maker. Why not? This is what I'm going to be using. We'll put that to one side and just focus on this kit. Most people don't realise that the signature swirl on Eruption didn't come from some secret box. It come from a bog standard Phase 90 that was available at the time. Crucially though, it was the script logo version, and Eddie placed it before his distortion, which is kind of unheard of in today's world of massive pedal boards with effects loops on your amplifiers and all this jazz. It just wasn't seen. The question is, can we get that smoother sound with the crank gain? So normally I don't use the stomp switches that come with pedal kits, as anyone who watches this channel will know. However, this one is rather nice. I mean, it's not gold pin like the ones that I use normally, but then again, it's super soft and it feels almost identical in quality. I'd be surprised if this isn't from the same manufacturer. So I will be using that. These jacks, I will be using them again. They're not too bad quality. They're probably not as good as the ones that I normally use, but you know, they're every bit as functional. So I'll be using them. Onto this. Now, I absolutely hate these with a passion. These are the PCB that goes on your stomp switch. If you're a beginner and you're building your first pedal, these are really handy. You can just put it on there, solder it, and then you've got all these connections to wire to your board. But for me, I just despise them, so I won't be using that. Sorry, Mr. Fuzzdog. I'll just be using my usual ponytail method of wiring up one of these things, just because that's what I like to do. What else do you get with the kit? Well, you get all of this wire, hook-up wire to build your pedal with, which is really great quality, to be fair. You get a lot of kits that just come with the bits. I won't be using that because I use my silicone wire. If you're interested in the wire I use, there'll be an affiliates link in the description. As ever, you can buy some for yourself. It's on Amazon. It's not particularly expensive. I will get a small kickback. It does help the show, but it won't charge you anything extra if you do buy it. Now, in this kit here, in this bag, we've got everything that we need. DC barrel jack, our potentiometer, which is the C-taper today. That's quite important. We've got our IC sockets, and then all the components. Great. I am going to be changing out some of the components. Thank you for watching my video so far. Just like to say thank you to everyone who's viewed the channel lately. We've got up to 950,000 views. We're 50,000 views away from 1 million. I can't believe it. Mental. Thank you. You get this. Well, you can download this and print it off. This is the build docs. They're fantastic. If you're a beginner and you want to build your first pedal, you literally can't go wrong with this kit. It really does give you everything that you really need without going over the top. So, what have we got in there? It explains the power supply, component specs, layout and stuff like that. We won't bother with any of that because obviously I have built a pedal before. You get your circuit drawing. This is interesting. So for anyone who's interested in learning about pedals, just trying to trace these circuits yourself is a real great way of learning how pedals work in the first place. For example, this little sign over here is our input. So we know that that's where our signal goes into the pedal. Great. We could follow that along and follow the signal path. These little triangles here are our op-amp stages. These four here are going to be this, And these two here are going to be this. All this TL072 does is it receives the signal, probably not to that pin, but it receives our guitar signal, splits it in two, sends one through the rest of the gubbins, and then the other half out. And that's what we call our analog drive-through. So if you're a fan of TPS like me, the That Pedal Show boys, they like their wet dry mixes, or dual mono, as people like to say. And the analog drive-through is real essential for that, otherwise you're going to get a phasing issue. So analog drive-through is created by this thing, and also it sends the signal through the phaser, and then that's mixed back into the normal signal. It's kind of how the phasing effect works, but without getting into all of that, you can follow this schematic drawing and try and teach yourself how this pedal works. It's just a great way to learn. However, for us, we're not going to bother with that. We're just going to jump straight in to what am I doing to make this an Eddie Van Halen pedal. First thing I'm going to do is C6. I'm going to change that. It's a 47 NF normally in the kit. I'm going to change that to 100 NF. This is part of making it sound more like the script logo version, which I'm pretty sure Eddie Van Halen used. We're bumping this up, and what it's going to do is it's going to make the effect overall a bit smoother. And if we're using a ton of gain, I think that's going to work with Eddie's sound. And just to be clear, the demo is going to be nothing like Eddie Van Halen, because Eddie, I am not, let's face it. And it also gives it a bit more of a vintage character. That's my assessment of it. So I'm going to change that to 100 NF. Next up, we've got C7. So actually, first of all, C6, while we're looking at it, is over here, C6, and it's between our phase stages. Essentially, that's what we're doing. We're changing part of our phasing stage. C7, this is going to slow the sweep of the pedal down, because I think Eddie Van Halen's tone had like a slower sweep to the phasing, basically. The next mod we're going to do is C7. We're going to be changing that from a 47 NF to a 100 NF cap. So what does C7 do? Well, first of all, if we look, C7 is over here on our schematic. And if we follow along what it's actually doing, it's on the positive side, and it's coming round up to this part of the circuit here. And if we look at this, this is attached to our speed pot. So that'll give us a clue on what it's going to do. So this is actually going to slow the sweep down. It's called the slow sweep mod. Slow sweep mod. That's a tongue twister. I don't know if I've just made that up, but I did read it on the internet, so maybe it is true. Ha! Right, so it's going to make the phase actually slower, and I think that's going to nail the Eddie Van Halen thing, because if you listen to the records, I feel like he has a real slow sweep rather than a sped up fast thing. It's also going to make the phase a little bit deeper as well. By the way, you could put all of these on a switch if you wanted to change through them, but this is specifically going to be an Eddie Van Halen pedal, so I'm not going to bother with that. So our C7 mod is going to make the sweep slow. It's going to make it slower, and it's also going to make it deeper. Perfect. Next up is C8. That's a 10 NF on this kit. We're going to bump that up to 22 NF. So where's C8? C8 is up here again. We can see it's by our speed pot, and it's actually part of the feedback loop for this part of our op amp. It's our dual op amp, our TL072, which is mixing the phase signal back in with our original signal. Because remember, our original signal is going to come out. I tell you what, while we're here, why don't we follow this signal path quickly? So our input comes in here, and it comes to this first stage. This triangle is the first half of our first op amp, which is this op amp. So it hits the first half of our op amp, and it splits into two. One side goes straight through, which is your clean signal, no alterations whatsoever, through Q1, and then out, basically. That's it. That's our analog drive-through that I was talking about earlier. The other side comes out of our op amp here, comes down and round and goes through this here, which is essentially this. And all that's doing is creating a phasing effect. And then what happens is it gets mixed back in through this bit here. It comes round here, and it's mixed back in through the second half of our dual op amp, our TL072. It's mixed back in here through Q1, and then comes out in the output. And that's how we get our phasing effect. Fantastic. So if we look at C8, that's in the feedback loop of the second half of our op amp. So it's affecting what's being mixed back in to our dry signal, essentially. And so the question is, what does it do to our sound? Well, again, it's part of that smoother and slower mod. So it's going to smooth it out a bit, and it's going to slow down the phase a little bit. And really, that's all I'm going to do to this pedal. So it's 3 little changes. One other thing to point out actually is on the script logo phase 90, this here C9 is a 10 microfarad, a 10 UF. On this kit, it's a 15 UF. Now, the explanation I found online is maybe it's a modern replacement, but I don't see why you need a modern replacement because 10 microfarads are available regularly. More likely it would be the other way around, where you would want to use a 15 microfarad because they're not as common, or at least for me, they're not as common. Don't know. But anyway, that's one thing. Another thing to note is, if we keep going through our plans, we have a larger picture on the back here, great, again, and this is our PCB. So if we look at our PCB and orientate it the same way, the feedback pot, which is here on the right hand side. Now this is optional. It says here 22k resistor across these 2 pads here in red is one option, or no 22k is another option. So down here, basically, this explains that the script logo version of the Phase 90 did not have this 22k resistor across these 2 pads here. It just didn't have it. Or the block logo version, a later version, adds a 22k resistor in this position. What Fuzzdog have done, which I think is amazing, is they've added a feedback pot in here. So essentially what you can do is you can decide what value you want. You can twist this pot to 22k, and it's saying here basically you can add a 50k trimmer here, and you can twist it to the midpoint, which would be about 22k, and you can have your 22k in here, or you can take it completely out the circuit and you can have it like a script logo. Brilliant. But I'm doing the Eddie Van Halen thing. I don't want anything to deviate from that, so I'm just going to omit that altogether. There's going to be no component there. What that might do is give me space to add in one of my large caps, just like to rest it on there and then run wires to when it needs to go on the circuit, but we'll see. Maybe I'll wire some offboard or something. Not sure yet. Now, it also explains later on how to bias your JFETs, because these are all, there's JFETs in here and what have you. It's just, this is a complex kit, but they make it so simple that a beginner could do it. And then you have your where is it? Chucked it away. Your wiring for this thing tells you how it all goes to your jacks and stuff, which is interesting. If you're a beginner, that'd be amazing. It shows you how to wire up that without the daughter board. It shows you what's happening without it, which is great as well. Again, I'm not bothered about that because I'm not going to use it. And then on the back, it even gives you a drill template that'll fit an enclosure. How good's that? All right, it's side mounted jacks and no one likes that. I think that's terrible. And I would much prefer to use my sloped enclosure with top mounted jacks and nitro whatever all over it and being fancy or whatever. But if you just wanted to tape this to the top of your pedal and punch out some marks on these points and drill it out, that's fantastic. That's half of the work done for you. Brilliant. And it even gives you the pot size hole, the jack holes, the foot switch holes, DC socket and toggle switch if you're going to add them. You've got to give them props for this. It's a fantastic kit. And it even gives you the exact enclosure to order a Hammond 1590B. Brilliant. Can't go wrong. I see online a lot of people say that Eddie Van Halen changed the face of rock. He's the most pivotal guitarist ever to existed. Well, I don't know if I agree with that, but I certainly don't disagree with it either. I'd like to know in the comments who's your favourite guitarist, who do you think changed rock, and let me know why. And here is all of our resistors for this project. I have actually decided that I'm not going to use them ones. I'm going to use my own resistors, most of which are going to be these carbon comp or carbon film type. All of that, apart from these bad boys, which are modern replacements. And these are the ones that Marcus Reeves uses, which is why I'm using them, because he's a legend. If you want to figure out why Marcus Reeves uses these, head over to the Pedal Dive podcast and check out the episode we did with him. He talks about the resistor legs being a different material than the lower wattage ones, and you can trust that he will have went through millions of different types to find the right ones, because he's just a tone geek like that. So I'm using them as well. And then we've got this particular resistor that I'm really happy we're going to get to use. So if we look at our schematic over here, we can see that we have a 3.9 meg. That's a real odd value. You don't normally use 3.9 meg for anything really. and I got this massive packet of these bad boys. Vintage, obviously, and I've been squiddling them away, hoping that I might get to use one day. And now, well, now's the time. But before we get to that, I am going to ditch all of them resistors, or at least put them in my random parts bin. I'll probably just use the legs. But before we get to that, what I am going to do is attach these, which are my sockets, my op-amp sockets, and my 250k bias pot. Why is that? Well, these are going to sit on a board, sort of in them positions. And that means that when I'm using these larger resistors and trying to figure out how I'm going to squeeze them in, I've got these already in place to work around. So then I don't put a resistor in their way because they have to be there type thing. If these resistors are too big to fit in, well then I'll go back to using one of them. Whereas that has to fit in, if you know what I mean. So first things first is to get them in. Now the trim pot's self-evident, or maybe it's not. So let's have a little look. Right, this is our trim pot here. It says bias on it, if I can get it in focus. Can I get it in focus? Yeah, it says bias on it. Now there is 6 holes in this, which is kind of odd because there's only 3 holes on a trim pot. Well, these 3 at the front are in line, and that is if you have this style trim pot with 3 in line. Now, if you have one of the other style trim pots that I normally use, the legs are in like a triangle shape, you have these 3 here. And you know, that's interesting enough, just because they've accommodated for having different style of trim pots. So if for some reason their manufacturer goes down on one of them, they can just order a different set. If you were to look at this here, you can kind of see that they're joined together. These 2 are joined together, these 2 are joined together, and these 2 are joined together. So that's the wiper there. That's the side, that'll be pin 1, which normally goes to earth or ground if you're doing a normal volume pot. And then there's the other pin. Interesting stuff. Anyway, we're going to be using that one. That one just goes straight in, no messing about. So don't really need to talk about that. But these sockets, these are important. So if we look down here, IC1, which is our dual op-amp, or TL072. If we look at the drawing, there's a tiny little nick out of the IC at the top. And that nick needs to correspond with the nick in our socket. Not that it really matters with the socket, but when it comes to using our actual IC, there'll be either a nick or a dot in the top half of it. We need to make sure that that's orientated, pointing up. Because if you put it in the wrong way round, the pins are all going to be messed up and it won't work. Of course, we can put the socket in the wrong way round and then put the IC in the right way round. Things will work, but it starts to get a bit confusing then. And, you know, it opens up a bit of ambiguity, or whatever you want to call it. And that way you can potentially, if you're rushing, you can put it in the wrong way round. So I'm going to just put that in now. There. And if we, normally I bend one leg over, but I'm not going to, because we're going to turn it upside down. Oh, look at that. And that's why you bend one leg over, because the bloody IC fell out. But if we turn it upside down and keep the IC in there, it won't fall out. You can just hold it in place, and then if I wet the tip, all I have to do is get one of these legs even a little bit soldered on there, and that'll hold the IC in place. Then I can go ahead and solder the rest of the legs in, no issues. Same with this next IC. It's longer, so it's got more legs, but it doesn't matter, the principle's just the same. There's a little nick out of the top of the circuit, or the top of the body, and we just correspond that with the nick out the top of our socket and place it in there, and it just sits in just the same. We can turn it upside down, and now it just rests there, and I can go ahead and solder away, and we're good to go. Now on to the resistors. Get in, and because there's about 10 billion 10k resistors in this, I'm just going to start with them over here. And because they're old as ever, I'm going to clean the legs using my Nipex snips, which again you can get through the affiliates link in the description if you want to help the show. Thank you to anyone who purchases stuff through Amazon. It's amazing. I use them to strip the crud off the legs, and people get real offended by it. The internet hates me doing that. Imagine not the internet hating anything, but they really despise me using this, because, you know, there's more civilized ways of doing it, or more professional ways of doing it, neither of which suits Hello Sailor Effects. So what are we going to do? Right, R1, R1 is over here, and I think that these resistors are going to be just about too big for me to bend the legs over and then sit flat. So I'm of course going to do what I call the Ibanez method. Just bend the resistor top over like that, and then the resistor can slot through the holes and sit off the board. I'm going to do that this way round, so the body is away from my op amp, just to give it a bit of space there. Yeah, so I mean, I don't think Ibanez invented that or anything. It's the most obvious pedals that I know that did that method, where they sit up like this. So then you flip it over, and now, what I like to do when soldering these specifically, this is interesting actually. So to get enough heat into your component without putting too much heat in the board, what I like to do is wet the tip, then put the iron on the leg of our resistor. So on the leg of our component, put the iron, put the solder on that, and then run them both down together. And when you meet the pad at the bottom, the solder will naturally wick into the pad. The pad obviously is less metal, so it's got, you know, less body there to heat up. So it heats up instantly because this is thicker and it just transfers the heat straight over. And because you're running the iron and the solder down the leg, it's heating the leg up at the same time. So then you'll find that the solder wicks right the way through, rather than sometimes you get a blob on the pad. So let's show that again. Just wet the tip, touch the leg with the tip, and then run the solder and the iron down until you touch the pad, and then just remove straight away. Now that one, I put a little bit too much on there because I was talking while I was doing it. Excuses, Joe. But that's our first resistor in. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go through all of these resistors. But before I do that, let's fit R21, which is our 3.9 meg. I'll just show you how I'm going to squeeze in these massive resistors. So R21 is over here on the board. It is really close to our larger IC. I am going to clean the legs as ever the same way as normal. Now, I'm assuming that this will not fit through the holes because it's a big resistor. You know, the kit comes with the right resistors to fit through the holes that the PCB is. So if you're doing things the way that it's supposed to be done, quote unquote, as per Fuzzdog's own layout and own build document, you will not have this problem. Let's see. And look, look at that. It will. There you go. A thicker leg with a bit of manipulation will actually go through. So R21's actually going to fit in. Look at that. Now this is where my previous soldering technique really comes into its own, because the legs on this are really thick. So if I was to touch the pad, so the solder pad, at the same time as the solder leg, it would take longer for the leg to heat up because there's more material there than the pad. And that means that you're putting unnecessary heat into the pad. Now these PCBs are made really well, so you can put a bit of heat in them, which is why I recommend them for beginners. You can put a bit of heat in them and they're not like going to peel the pad off. Not like a Joyo pedal. If you put a bit too much heat into them pads, you're knackered. This is where sliding your iron down the leg and then touching the pad really comes into its own. I don't know what made me think about doing that. I don't think I've seen it anywhere on the internet. If anyone knows anyone who recommends doing that, then let me know. And if anyone thinks it's stupid and there's a better way, please also let me know. So iron on there, solder touches it down, touch the pad, back up again. Perfect solder joint. A little bit too much solder on there, but do you know what? I don't care. It's as long as I'd rather have too much solder on there and it still look neat and get a good connection rather than a cold solder joint than not enough solder on there and it look fine on the surface, but actually it's not a good joint. So that's how I'm going to fit our larger ones. And as you can see, some of these resistors are going to be way bigger than the caps. I mean, that's a bit of a squeeze on this board. If I can get them all on, I will. If I can't, I'll just go back to using the 1/4 watt resistors that come with the kit. There's all of our resistors in place. And as you can see, this thing's looking insane at the minute. It's like a big hedgehog. Some of these are massive, but, you know, needs must. Oh, that one's not very straight. Not happy with that. Anyway, now before we move on to the capacitors, I'm just going to deal with the diodes. So our diodes are these two. We've got a 1N, let's see if I can read this, 1N4001, probably the most common power protection diode that we see out there. And then we've also got this 5.1 volt Zener diode. So D1 is a 5.1 volt Zener diode, which is over here. What you may not be able to see on the board itself is that D2, the square, is the end that has the line going across it. The anode, which is the negative side. Sorry, the cathode. I always mess them up. It's my dyslexia. So the cathode, the negative side, is the square. And same on D1. You have the line here, which is the cathode. The negative side is pointing upwards. So if I put that to one side, D1, our 5.1 volt Zener diode, has the line pointing uppermost to the top of our circuit on D1, which is the square pad. If we place that in there, so on this 5.1 volt Zener diode, the line is black and the diode is like an orangey colour. This actually is still a little bit too big to fit in them pads the way that I've bent it, but it doesn't matter. A bit too long, should say. So there we can check it again. Our black line is pointing uppermost, which goes to the square pad. That's our cathode. Now for D2, I'm going to fold this over on itself, or bend this over on itself, much like we did all of the resistors. And I'm going to do it so then a line, the body sits up against the cathode, which is the line, which sits on the outboard side of the circuit, just because it keeps it out the way. So we can double check square pad is where our line's going to go. You can see the board's kind of designed for this one to sit in this manner. If you're like making the components, if you're getting the components together yourself, you could use like a 1N4007 for this position, or basically any power protection diode. You don't have to stick with this. Anyway, I prefer the 007s because they're what I use in amplifiers, because they're higher rating, voltage rating, current rating. I'm going to solder all of these in. Yeah, remember, diodes, as I always say, they particularly don't like heat. So, you know, be careful while you're soldering in. But also, you don't want to get a cold solder joint because your pedals just won't work. Right. Now they're out the way. They're kind of resistor shaped anyway, aren't they? Which is why I like to do them at this point. That's all of the resistors in, and I'm sure you'll forgive me for indulging my vintage sort of vibe. However, when it comes to the capacitors, I've kind of run out of space, so I'm going to have to stick to what is in the kit. Now we're on to the caps. I like to split them up, so I put the electrolytic caps in second, and first of all we'll do the box caps. Now they're all these type of film caps. They're particularly good quality. You know, they're nothing special, but they are good quality. I do like to change them out, but as we can see from our board, I don't think I'm going to get much chance to squeeze anything in there. I'm just not. Apart from the caps that I'm going to change myself, there's no point. So I'm going to go ahead and just put all of these in place. Before we do that, we're going to add in our modified caps. So we've got our two 100 NF caps, or 0.1 microfarads, and our 22 NF, 0.022 microfarads. So first up is C6, which is going to be our 100 NF cap. If you remember, this is our first mod cap. C6 is in the phaser part, if we remember back to our drawing. C6 is over here. Handily, these box caps are going to fit in nicely, so I don't have to do any messing about. Which is nice because, let's face it, with the way that I've done the resistors, there isn't much space to do anything else. Next up is our C7, which is another 100 NF cap. C7, if you remember, is in the output of our phasing side of it that feeds back into the dual op amp. So the bottom left hand corner of our whole schematic is C7, and it's situated in this top corner of this board, of the whole board over here. And I said this board as if there's more than one. And then lastly, C8, that's normally a 10 NF, but we've changed that to a 22 NF. We've got this tropical fish cap, which is the first of my, or the only of my extravagant capacitors. I feel rather sad about that, but there you go. So C6, no, not C6, what am I talking about? C8 is down here. That's going to be a bit of a challenge. Normally what I like to do is bend one leg over on itself and bend it down so then the cap overhangs, but the legs are the right spacing. However, if we look at the slot that we're going in, there isn't really space to do that. So if we see here, there's literally this resistor one side and that resistor the other side with the op amp. So there's no room to do that. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to get my legs in the holes if I can. And you've got to be careful on this because these capacitors can be quite delicate around these edge bits because, you know, they're old. But I'll get them in there and I'll just waddle it down a bit. Waddle it down. That's the technical term, by the way. Until it's a reasonable height. You know, with our enclosure, it doesn't really matter because we've got loads of space in the enclosure for it to sit high. And I'm just going to sit it like that. And that's how it's going to go in. So if I turn that upside down, I can now just solder all of these components in. And that's our mod essentially done. The rest of it is going to be just fitting box caps exactly how they're supposed to be fitted. So let's get these in. And then if we snip off all these legs, tidy it all up. There's all of our mod caps in place. We've got our two 100 NFs and one 22 NF. Now, to go through it, I'm just going to find, for example, if we find our first capacitor, which is C1, it's a 10 microfarad. These are labelled up as 10 NK on here. So 10 NK, that is C1, and C1's located right by this trim pot here. It's going to be a bit of a nightmare to get in there because capacitors are normally bigger than resistors, which is why you start with resistors. But in my case, because I went mental on the resistors are going to sit higher than the caps. So I've made hard work for myself. Essentially, I should have put the capacitors in first. But whenever I do that, I always get someone in the comments, you know, smugly saying, you're doing it the wrong way around. Well, it depends. So if I hold that in place and bend the legs out, so hard because I can't get in there to hold it down because all the components around it are taller than it, which is fantastic. Right, so I've bent them legs out and now I can just solder that in place. Like so. And there's our first capacitor in place that isn't part of the mod. I'm going to go ahead now and just put the rest of these caps in and then we'll get onto the electrolytics. Just 3 electrolytics on this board. This one here, 22 NF, 22 NF, 22 UF, 22 microfarad. It's a JB cap, which is the ones that I like to use, the radial ones anyway. Great quality cap. Then we've got this 15 microfarad cap as well and a 100 microfarad cap. So where did they go? C10 is our 100 microfarad, which is over here, and it's marked up with the square pad having a plus sign next to it. And as we know from previous videos, the longest leg is the plus, is the positive leg, and the shortest leg is the negative leg, because these caps are polar. These ones have a negative next to the shorter cap to let you know it's the negative. Brilliant. So double check that the longest leg, which is our positive, is going to go into the square pad and then slot it in place. I'm going to hold this right up against the board and just bend the legs out so it can't go anywhere. This cap is our 15 microfarad cap, so 15 NF. We have a gold stripe down it, which is our negative, and 15 NF is C9. So C9 is here. Positive is pointing inboard to the pedal. Inboard. Take the boy out the navy, can't take the navy out the boy, eh? There you go. So we can hold that right the way down and bend the legs out so it stays in situ. And then again, we have C12, which is our 22 microfarad cap. And again, we have the positive pointing inboard and the negative pointing outboard. That's just above our 15 microfarad. So it sits all the way down there. And I'll just bend the legs out so I can get in there and solder them up. And now we're onto the transistor. So there is 1 transistor and 4 JFETs. The JFETs used in these are 2N5457s. So these are a little less gain than the J201s in my opinion, but much more gain than something like a J113 that I like to use. They're really hard to come by real ones, which is why I'm amazed that this kit comes with 4 matched. That's just mad. A match set of 4, brilliant. I'm just going to use the ones that come with the kit, and they are labelled up as, let's see, Q1, no, sorry, Q1 is our 5087, and Q2 to 5 are our matched JFETs, which are Fairchild branded 2M5457. I would advise that if you're going to buy some JFETs, don't buy them off eBay or Amazon. You're getting fake ones if you do that. Buy them from a reputable shop and stay away from Fairchild because they're the most cloned ones. So the little F on the front of these are Fairchild. If you buy enough, you get a feel for which ones are real and which ones aren't. The dimensions are just different. These are real, which is great. I'm truly ecstatic about that. Now, rather than testing them like I always do with our DCA 55, I do always say test them. However, these come as a kit, and I know that Fuzzdog will have tested all of these. I mean, they match them for the start. They will have tested all these because they make amazing kits, and they want you to build a pedal that works, funnily enough. So I'm not going to bother testing them. What I am going to do is just put them in. So our flat face of our 2N5087, I forget which one we're using, is going to point towards the flat face on our actual transistor drawing. So if I show you that there, you can see that each of these transistors has like a flat edge, and that is the flat edge on our actual transistor. So as long as we put them in that way round, we should be good to go. You could always test them just to be sure, especially if you're, I mean, I will say, if you're like assembling the components yourself and you're not just buying them straight from Fuzzdog, then absolutely you want to test them. You don't want to be going to plug this bad boy in to test it and rip to my Eddie Van Halen and then figure out that nothing works because your transistors don't work because you never bought legit ones or bought ones that work for the start. I'm just going to place them all in the same manner and solder them on the bottom. Well, that's our board fully complete. Wow, that was a bit of a mental one. Now we're going to move on to the wires. So what wires are going to come off this board? If you're wiring it like Fuzzdog, you'll have the wires coming straight out of here and going to, if we can find it again, this thing, which I'm not going to use. Sorry, Fuzzdog, I know you probably advise people to use that. And then there's also, if you're wiring it like Fuzzdog, they have, on the drawing you can see, the pot is attached to the back of the board, and then the pot attaches into the pedal, and that's what holds the circuit board in place, or the PCB in place. If we look at the way that mine is drilled here, if I was to do that, well, I could probably, would I get away with that? Oh, this is tempting. So normally I would mount my PCB directly to the enclosure with steel reinforced epoxy. However, I could get away with that maybe. Oof. This is the one. Will the jacks foul it? It's like, I don't think they will. I think I could get away with the jacks being in there. So then the question is, what about the power socket? Which I'm going to change for the red one, by the way. I've just decided. Oh, come on now. I think that's good. I'm going to get away with that too. So I'm not going to attach wires to these. What I was going to do is I was going to attach wires to the bottom of this board and run them to the pot. But I'm not. I'm going to actually use the pot to mount the board in. Ha! I've never done that before, so wish me luck. So with the wires, actually, before we start mounting the pot and getting everything in place for that, let's attach our wires. What we need is, we need 4 wires. The input, the output, the 9-volt and the ground. Okay, so just 4 wires. And to do that, I'm just going to pull out some of my silicone wire, the aforementioned silicone wire, give myself a good length so I can definitely reach where I need to go and clip it. Now, this is wasteful because I'm clearly not going to need this much wire, but there's nothing worse than having this PCB in the pedal, go to run your wire and it doesn't quite reach. So frustrating, and I buy loads of this wire, so a little bit of waste, I can just use it for a different application later on. Then I line the 4 wires up together so they're roughly the same length. Take my Nipex snips and then just strip the ends of them, and I can give them a twist and then a tin, and that'll give me a solid bit of wire out the end there that I can then poke through the pad and give it a solder. There's our wires attached. Now we're onto our pot. We've got our 4 wires at the bottom, so if we point them towards the bottom, this is the bottom of our PCB pointing in the right direction. We take our pot and we can see that the little tab on the left hand side of our pot here is still in place on this drawing, and that's showing that pointing on the left hand side. Right, before we attach it, I'm just going to remove that tab because my enclosure doesn't have a space for it. So we can just slot the pot straight in there. It will sit there. That's the right way round because we can see it on the Fuzzdog schematic. That's not enough for me because, yes, this is going to be floating, which is fine. It'll be soldered in place, so it'll be held on by the pot legs. But just to give it a bit of extra support, what I'm going to do is take some of this sellotape double-sided sticky pads. Again, there'll be an Amazon affiliates link for these. I literally couldn't build pedals without them. I use them to mount my tag board into the enclosures with a bit of steel reinforced epoxy. They're just super handy and super sticky. So I'm going to take one of these sticky foam pads and I'm going to attach it to the bottom of my pot. And then that way, when I mount it into onto the PCB, we're going to have, oh, that's a bit poor drills there, Joe, having it hanging over the edge. It doesn't look particularly good. So let's remove this. I should have cut that before sticking it in. Well, or to remove the excess. So you can do it with your Stanley blade if you may, or pair of scissors or something. Watch out because they are super sticky once you've removed all of the backing. But if I put that on the bottom, it's just exactly the right width to sit between the PCB and the pot. So I can squeeze that in there. And now that is completely held in place for when I'm soldering, which is handy because it's going to be a bit tight. But also, it's just that little bit of extra stability for when it's in the enclosure, because this PCB is literally going to be held in by this. I mean, I could put some steel reinforced epoxy on there, but I don't think I'm going to need it. Now comes the tricky bit. Can I actually solder this in the middle of all of that? So I'm going to use my method of running the soldering iron down the leg if I can get in there without touching anything else. It's a little bit of a squeeze, but I think I'm going to be able to do it. And don't forget, when you're doing this sort of thing, don't ever put your iron next to anything if you haven't got a clear line of sight. So if I'm going this way round, I might foul the back of that cap, but if I twist it, I'm basically going over thin air now. So don't be afraid to manipulate your work round to get it into a position where you're not going to touch anything, you know? I think a lot of time, and I include myself in this, we're just so eager to get the iron on there that we don't think about like clear line of sight of the pad or whatever, and we go straight in there like a bull in a china shop and do some damage to the components that we've just spent forever soldering on. Right, there's that in place, and we are ready to get it all mounted into the enclosure. Before we go ahead and mount everything into the enclosure, of course, we've got to fit our op amps because it becomes awkward once it's in the enclosure. So our TL072, our dual op amp, 8 legs. What you have to do is just push the legs in on themselves because they come splayed out, so they don't quite fit into the into the sockets. And what I like to do is use my flat nose pliers just to get in there, or my flat nose snips, whatever you want to call them, and mount it roughly in the right position. And then what you've got to be careful of is, I've just nearly pushed that then, and not all the legs are actually in the socket. If all the legs aren't in the socket, what you do is you end up bending the legs out, and they're never the same after that. Another thing to note, this op amp doesn't have a nick in the top, it just has a dot. Fine, that dot has to point in the same direction as the little nick out of our socket, which is the case, so I can push it down, we're good to go. Now this TL074, it's got more legs, but it's the same theory. Instead of a dot, we've got the nick out the top of this one. Fine, Confusingly though, there is a dot at the bottom. I'm going with the nick. Maybe I'm wrong here, I don't know. You just squeeze the legs in on themselves. And then line it up onto the socket. Again, this one's a bit more fiddly. Once you've got one side in, you can just use your flathead screwdriver just to bend the other legs over a little bit more so then they make it into the socket. It's worth spending the time here to make sure that all the legs are going to go in, because if you bend them the wrong way, it's just going to ruin the whole thing. And then squeeze it in, and we are in there. Now we can mount it in our enclosure. This is everything inside of our enclosure. This is how it's going to look. I've got my metal LED bezel there, looking rather good. I went with a red DC barrel jack just because I think it matches this. And I also put one of my big washers on it just because then that draws the jack out of the enclosure to give me enough space to fit the board in. So I went like mounting the board to the enclosure. Great, all good. It's worth noting at this point that you also get this clear 3mm LED. I'm assuming it's blue, I don't actually know. Maybe I'll test that later. But you get this clear LED for your pedal. I'm not going to use that. I'm using this blue LED. It's a, let's see if I can get that out of focus. No chance. It's a flat topped one. Makes no difference, but these are a bit more expensive and I rather like them. So I'm going to mount that in and then we can get to wiring it up. Now that the LED's in, it's time to start wiring it up. And I'm just going to go ahead and get these wires done and out of the way first, just so then I can see what's going on. And we can see our first wire, which is this left-hand wire. This is going to be a little bit wobbly because I haven't got an LED on it, a knob on it. Right, the first wire is in. So that's the input of the whole thing. And that is this front left-hand side tag on our 3-pole double throw switch. So what I'm actually, normally I run the wires round the back of our 3-pole double throw switch and run them in this way. I'm not doing that this time. I'm going to run them up the front just for ease. And so this wire comes up and it attaches into that tag. But I'm going to do the Marcus Reeves, I'm calling it the Marcus Reeves method because I learned it from him. I'm going to run the wire continuously through to this back tag here, which means that when our earth is connected to off, i.e. the pedal's off, our earth, this center pin, is going to connect to the input of this circuit and earth it out, so there's no chance of this causing noise in the signal chain when the pedal's off. I love that. Thank you, Marcus, for making a video on that. Do highly recommend subscribing to Marcus's Instagram channel. He has some awesome shorts. Not least of which is the Monday Minute, which is most fun of all. Mainly because I like to see what t-shirt he's wearing, so I can see what my my next fashion attire purchase is. Right, so we skin it long enough so then it'll fit through both tags. And then, of course, we're going to need to tin it, because otherwise when we try and poke it through, this is just going to unravel and it's a right pain. We'll give it a tin, and now this will go through the tag that we actually want, our input to our circuit, and then also through this extra earth connection, and we can just solder both of them in like so. And again, I do always say, like the transistors and the trim pots and the potentiometers, the 3-pole double throw switch does not like to be hammered with heat. So yes, solder it with enough heat, but do be mindful. Next tag, what am I saying? I'm holding a wire and calling it a tag. Next wire along is our voltage, and that's going to run back under ourselves and go into these two pins here on our barrel jack. Now, if you look at the Fuzzdog wiring, he'll show you that one half can be for the battery. Great if you're going to run a battery snap. I am not. I don't see the point in running battery snaps in pedals because we should all have massive pedal boards. So I'm going to run this wire round here, and then I'm going to skin it long enough so then it'll go through both of these tags. Now that our 9 volts is going from our circuit to this bottom pin on our DC jack, I've run enough wire through so then it's touching the next live pin. You know, the 2 pins that are live are the ones that look exactly like each other. The negative's a little bit bigger. Now, the other hole, I'm going to run the live for our LED. So the longer leg of our LED. And all I've done is I'll take a strip of wire, if if I'm not knocking everything everywhere. Strip it and tin it, so then I can get it through the tag on our jack. Now, one thing about this now is I don't need it that long, so I'm going to snip it short, because that'll save me having to faff about trying to get the snips in there to cut it later on, because it's going to be real hard to get in here because the circuit is so damn close to it. There we are, it's in place. Now all I have to do is solder it in without melting my IC there, which is the bit that creates the phase effect. Now, as we can see, is I've left too much on the end of that, so I'm going to have to get the snips in there and snip it off. That's okay. Ooh, and I've just snapped my LED off. But you get the idea. Now, this is going to come round and attach to the longer leg of my LED once I have stuck it in place. Now that's in place, the next wire along is our ground. I'm going to leave that for a second because it's a bit more involved, and move on to this one, which is our output. Now our output goes to this front right pin. Now you could, if you wanted to, run it through to the ground. There's no point. You just come straight along here and go straight into the front right hand side of our 3-pole double throw switch, and that is going to be the output of the whole thing. All we need is a little bit off the end there, because we don't want it to poke too far through. This silicone wire is just so easy to work with, and you'll notice that I'm not burning wires, or it's not, you don't need real hot you don't need like heavy duty wire strippers and anything like that. You can just do it all with your Nipex nips. Because of the way that this circuit is mounted, I've had to put my jacks sort of mirroring each other, so there's no straight line where I can put an earth buzz bar across. Really annoying. So what are the points that we're going to join together? This point here, this is an earth, and that's going to come up here, the same line as we followed for the whole of it, and attach this center pin here, which is our earth connection. I'm going to run another wire out of this earth connection and come round this side of the front pin and down, and I'll follow the wiring loop under the board round, and it's going to go to this center tag here, or the center lug if you like. In fact, yeah, it's going to go to that center lug here on our jack, and then a wire from there is going to come out and come round and go to this tag at the bottom here, which is the earth for our output, because remember the pedal's upside down, so the output's on the right instead of the left. I messed that up so many times when I'm testing pedals. Such a nightmare, especially when you're trying to chase a fault down and you're thinking about other things. Anyway, and then also another wire is going to come round and come to this pin here, which is the earth of our input. So the points that are going to be joined together is this point on the board, this point on our 3-pole double throw switch, the earth on our DC barrel jack, this tag at the bottom here, and this tag at the side here. All of that is going to be joined together. Now, of course, the jacks will be attached to the enclosure. So technically, you only need to attach one of the jacks to earth, and the other one should be here through the enclosure. I don't like to do that, because if these come loose for whatever reason, gigging guitarist in and out, changing pedal boards all the time, whatever it is, maybe it's been thrown in an aircraft hold, the temperature drops, which means that the casing contracts, because metal shrinks when it's cold, and then these loosen off, so because it's contracted, whatever, doesn't matter. I prefer to have a solid wire going to each of them, because then if these come loose, you still get sound pass through it. It's just annoying. Next up, we're going to run our main wires, which is the bypass signal. So we're going to have from the input, this jack down here, the tab down here. It's going to run underneath the board, come up our ponytail, and go into this front pin here. Then we're going to have a loop going between this back pin on the left hand side to the back pin on the right hand side. That's where our bypass signal is going to go when the pedal's off. Then we're going to have a wire coming from this pin here, down our ponytail and round, and going to this tag here on our output. And that's all of our signal wires. Now we're on to the final bit, which is adding in the current limiting resistor from our LED. I like to add these on the negative side of the LED. So we're going from the negative side of the LED round and to this pin here on our 3-pole double throw switch. Now I'll attach this ground connection to our LED to give the current somewhere to go. And of course, if you miss out this current limiting resistor, just burns your LED out straight away, which, as you can imagine, I've done plenty of times. So let's see. If I bend my my resistor here at a 90-degree angle, and I sort of match that up to where we're going to be here, like exactly where it's going to sit, I can see that I need to take a bite about here. I mean, this is all just roughing it in. So I've made that type of shape. And now I can slide it in and solder in my my first connection, which is to the soldering my first connection to the stomp switch. Might as well trim off the excess while I'm here. Now it's just a case of bending the LED leg round so then it meets the LED without putting too much pressure on the LED itself, because I haven't glued it in properly just yet. There. Now if we trim off the excess, I think that should be us ready for some of the most important bits, some beautiful cable tie. Not all that much to cable tie in this one, I'm afraid. I managed to squeeze 3 of them in there, but it's looking pretty good. I mean, what do we think of the circuit? I really like how this PCB is laid out. I really hope it makes sound. Oh man, it'd be disappointing if I go through all this and it doesn't make sound. Now on to the important bit. Which knobs would you choose? This is a bit that's close to my heart because I think that the look of the pedal is just as important as how it sounds. So for this, I've got a mammoth selection of knobs. First up, we've got our Dumble style witch hat knob. These are rather large on the general scheme of things, and I find it hard to fit them on some pedals, but because there's just one knob on this pedal, it makes it really easy to go through a selection. So I only need to find one and accommodate one. I mean, that looks pretty good to me, although I'm just not sure it's right for this. It looks a bit odd on its own. I wonder what you think of that. Then we've got these bakelite knobs. I like to call them the Gibson knobs because they look a little bit like some of the 60s knobs that Gibson used on their amplifiers. Some of the Skylark, the Crestline Skylark stuff, which as anyone who watches this channel will know that I'm a massive fan of, being as I've got a 65 Skylark GA5T. So there's that. What do we think? I like the look of this, but another important thing about this is it feels premium. It feels kind of nice. So this was an obvious choice for me, you know, being red. And so we've got the red chicken head knob. The only issue I've got with this one is I think it looks a little bit too similar to the red on here. So it kind of disappears. Now, I don't play live, but if I was playing live, I'd be worried about knowing where it's set. What do you think about that? Do you think it's a bit odd? And then if you don't approve of that one knowing where it's set, what about this massive chicken head knob? I kind of like that. I mean, I'm finding somewhere for this knob to go, but because it's so big, it's really hard to find a pedal that will fit on. And it fits in with this one nicely, because there's nothing for it to foul on, basically. Well, then we go on. These are probably my favourite knobs. Nah, one of my favourite knobs here. They're very heavy, which I like. And the old Neve equipment knobs. It's similar enough in colour to the red and the pink that it fits in with the pedal. But it's also different enough that it stands out, that you'll be able to see it. They look classy, I think. Real classy. Then speaking of classy, the classic. The Klon knob. Bakelite, Dackaway. See it from a mile away. Again, the colour of it kind of fits in with the theme. My only gripe about these ones is there's no silver on it, so it doesn't tie in with these appointments. Now, I love these, but I tend to be using them a hell of a lot lately. It's the Big Muff style knobs. The Soviet era Green Russian Big Muff style knobs. What do we think about them? I've also got white as well. So if you think white would look good on it, let me know. Another favourite, the old cupcake knobs. I'm a fan of these, but I don't know about it on this pedal. Again, I think it looks a bit similar to the shell pink for it to really work on this pedal. And last but not least, I've used these quite a bit. I use this on a lot of pedals lately. It looks good on there, but it's a little bit small. With all this space, I want to use it because I don't get to, you know, be extravagant and use large knobs all the time. Although I do try to, but I use these quite regularly. So I'm going to say no to that, no to the cupcake. I don't know about the red. I really don't know about the red. I like that it ties in with everything, but it is a bit samey, so maybe I'll say no to that. And now it's just these left. Part of me wants to go with that just because I like the look of it, but I've used them quite a lot lately. Don't know. This is my last one of these Gibson knobs. I like them, but I could probably squeeze that on a different pedal, maybe with two of them to go with it. So I'm going to say no to the Gibson. Now, I love this. I love these knobs in general, but I've used them a lot lately. I used like 5 white ones on my distortion build, so I'm going to say no to that. So that leaves really these 3. Let me know in the comments what you would have chosen and why. Of course, if you purchase this pedal, there'll be a link there'll be a link in the description and a pinned comment. If you purchase this pedal, of course, if you send me an email or send me a message on social media, I'd be more than happy to change the knob for you. But, I don't know. Part of me thinks I'm going with this one just because I can. Before we get on to any proper sound sample, we've of course got to bias our JFET. Now, in here, on our build docs, it says biasing. Use the bias trimmer, which is this trimmer here, the 250K trimmer. Use the bias trimmer to adjust the voltage at the gates of the FETs. So I know my pin out, and this pin here, which is, if we're facing the flat edge to the right hand side, that is the gate, drain source gate, if I'm right. Okay, so use the, sorry, I lost where I was then. Use the trimmer to adjust the voltage at the gate of the FETs. Great. You can do this by ear simply by tweaking until you get the best phasing effect. Brilliant. But if you want to do it by numbers, it should be around 3 volts. Well, I'm going to tweak it in at 3 volts, see what it sounds like. And if I like the sound, great. And if I don't like the sound, I'll change it. I am, of course, going to use my Fluke 101. Again, as ever, you can get this in the description. I'll put it to volts DC. I'll take my black lead, which is the negative lead, and I'll put that to earth. Right now, I'm just going to put it in my, I'll tell you what, I'll put it in my enclosure there. Then the red lead, if I just touch the gate of any of the JFETs, that'll give me a reading. But of course, being an absolute idiot, I haven't plugged it in, so there's no power there whatsoever. You're not going to get any voltage if you don't have it plugged in. Well done, Joe. So there we can see we're at 2.5 volts, 2.6. Now I have no idea which way round this is going to turn to give me more voltage, so I'm going to go up. And I also don't know whether this is like a lots of turns to the pot before it does anything, or whether it's, you know, like a micro tune, if you like. It is going up that way, maybe. So that went as high as 2.9 then for a little second. It's kind of waving around. I'm guessing that's with the oscillation of the pedal. Let's see where we are. There you go. We're going up and above 3 and then back down to 2.9. Tell you what, I'm just going to try and get an average. So then like the middle of the swing. So 3.1 there and 2.8. A little bit more, I think, to get it to be right in, if you know what I mean, like the middle of the highest and the lowest is right on 3 volts. So there's 3.5, and its lowest we're going down to 8.5. That looks okay to me. No layout can tell you how a pedal feels. Crucially, you've got to plug it in and see what's going on. So at this point, we're going to see if this mod that I plan on doing, taking it from the script logo version to the block logo version, is it worth doing? And then if it's worth it, we'll install a switch. If you built this kit and add this mod to it, I'd like to know in the comments, did you add the mod? Did you not add the mod? Did you do my other mods? I'd love to know. Let me know in the comments. Okay, so we've got it plugged into our Victory V40, and this is what it sounds like. Helps if you got the guitar turned up. Okay, so if I turn the guitar's volume down, now hear the difference between the normal mode or the script mode like we've just had, and then adding in this 22k resistor for the block logo mode. And if I pull the resistor now, you can hear there's a marked difference. It's much darker. It's hard to explain. It's darker, but it's more vocal, and it's smooth. So it's darker, more vocal, and smoother type in the script mode, and then in the block mode, it's like brighter and more present. I imagine Eddie runs this after this gain stage, so I imagine having it in the script mode would really suit that. But if you've not got it in the script mode, it doesn't sound all that great. Well, it does sound great. That's a lie. It's not that. It sounds a bit dark for me. And I bearing in mind I'm playing a Les Paul Custom, so it's quite a dark guitar anyway. But so my plan now to mitigate this and make it all right, it's an Eddie Van Halen pedal, but you know, I want to offer value for money. I'm going to add in this little toggle switch. We're going to put it right about here. So on our pedal, it's going to sit roughly about here. Just a little toggle switch, and it'll take us from the script logo to the block logo. Now, I want to know in the comments, what do you think about this? Do you think I should have stuck with just going after that one Eddie Van Halen tone like I initially went out for? Or do you think adding this extra mod of adding our vintage carbon comp resistor in to give us that extra tone, is that worth it? Does it make this pedal better value for money? Or am I cheating on the ideals of Mr. Van Halen's tone? Let me know in the comments. Okay, so here we are. We have our double pole, double throw switch added in. It's a 2 position, so it's on. If you're going to buy this, they do on, off, on, which is the 3 position switches. You don't want that. You want the 2 position switch. Firstly, we need our 22k resistor, which is going to be for our block logo setting. Great. I'm just going to use the one that we've already used. I'm going to take 2 of my wire offcuts, because why not? Why waste wire? And strip them, and then we can give them a tin. This would have been much easier, believe me, if I'd have done this when the PCB was out of the pedal. That would have been much preferable, but I didn't know I was going to do it, and I am one for chopping and changing my mind on mods and stuff. You know, if I was to build 10 of these pedals, I'd probably do different mods to them and what have you. I really would love to know if you're planning to do this build and buy the Fuzz Dog kit, if you're going to do the same mod. It'd be interesting to know if you're going to add this in, or whether you're just going to, you know, build it straight Eddie Van Halen, or even just straight how it is in the thing. Right. So to do this now, I'm basically going between this hole here and this hole here. If we look on our build schematic, we can see they're highlighted in red. I'm going to do the inboard one first, because then I can get in with my soldering iron. What we need to remember is I can't get to the bottom of this board without taking everything out. I really don't want to do that, mainly because I'm lazy. That's it. So I'm going to poke this through the hole, and I'm going to leave about a mil of the unsheathed wire sticking out, so then I can get my iron in and solder to it. That's the plan anyway. I'll tell you what. Do you know what? I've just had the thought, why am I doing that when I can bend this up and have a go at trying to get it through the board from the underside? Now this is ambitious, but let's try. So if I put that through this side, what I can do is bend it over, and then if I solder that in place where it is, it's going to be almost like I did it before the board was in. Look at that. And now I can get in to snip off the excess and everything. Genius. Now it really doesn't matter which way round you go with these wires. They can attach to either side of our resistor because it's non-polar. Oh man, I'm really happy with how that turned out. See, this is another bonus of not attaching a board straight to the to the enclosure, because this would have been impossible. Right, now that's out the way. These two wires go to the two center lugs of our double pole, double throw switch. What happens is when a switch is in a down position, it brings these two, this pin attaches to this pin and this pin attaches to this pin, which means that nothing happens and we stay in a script logo mode, because my resistor is going to be attached across these two pins here like this. So when the switch is in the up position, it attaches this tag to this tag and this tag to this tag, which then attaches our resistor, our 22k resistor, almost as if we soldered it directly to the board. So with these wires, I should really get some heat shrink around them, and they're going to go, I'm going to put them straight up through the middle here, and they're going to go there. So if I give them a cut there, and we've also got some heat shrink for no other reason than I've got it and to make it look pretty. In fact, why am I heat shrinking it? This is a great excuse to add more cable ties. Hey, we'll sack the heat shrink off, and just for Glyn, because I know he loves how much I put cable ties in my work, I get to add another couple of cable ties in. Oh man, I wish I'd have thought about this in the beginning. I'd have done it anyway. Has anyone built any of the Jeds Peds kits, by the way? I did the Zen drive not long ago for a video. I think I did like a Rutherford Zen drive today or something like that, and it was a real great video. And to be fair, I really like their kits. The quality of them are fantastic, if you can't tell, and they're great platforms if you're getting into like adding vintage resistors and stuff to pedals. They're a great platform to start with because you know the circuit's right, and you can always go back and change some bits out, you know, if something doesn't work. Right, I'll get some cable ties in there later, but right now what I want to do is get my resistor in. So I've bent the legs over, snip them the same length, and then I'm just going to slide that in here, and I'll lie it on its side so then when people open the pedal, they'll be able to see it. I mean, it is a carbon comp resistor after all, a rather expensive one. There we are. Right, let's get that bent up so it's visible. There we go. There. Now we have a script and block logo mode switcher. So in the up position, we're in our block logo, and in the down position, we're in our script. And now it's time for the sound sample. But before we get there, I'd like to say thank you to everyone viewing these videos. It's just mad that this has become a thing. I have got one small request. If you could just press the like and then the share button below. You don't even have to share it. If you just press share and copy, it'll let YouTube know that I bring value to you, and it'll share this to more people, and it'll help me grow. Thank you. Okay, now it's time for the sound sample, and I'm going to be using this at first. It is my 74 Black Les Paul Custom, of course. But before we get to that, I'd like to just say, check these bad boys out. I've got these new Hi-Fi Man headphones. They're amazing. Headphones, monitors. I'll drop a link in the description for an Amazon affiliates link in case anyone wants to check them out or whatever. And I do get a kickback. But they're absolutely awesome. It's like I'm hearing in 3D. I had some Bayer Dynamic things before, which I thought were good. But I'm telling you now, they're just on another level. And I sit here for hours with them on as well. They're so comfortable. Anyway, enough banging on about my new monitors. The Captain X loves them. Here we go. This is the clean tone. Bridge pickup. Right, this is in the block logo version. Script logo. And as you can hear, it's a bit deeper. Back to the block logo. And now with the Randy Rhodes distortion. logo. It's interesting because I prefer the block logo version when I turn the speed up. I don't really like the script version, but when we turn the knob down, say to like 9-10 o'clock-ish, I think I much prefer the script logo version. So this is the block logo version with the speed down. And then back to the script logo. And with block logo. Now, I love the sound of that. I'd love to know what you think, firstly, of this awesome guitar. I mean, it really is awesome. And the tones of the Randy Rhoads with the Eddie Van Halen. Next up, we're going to hear it with Fake Red and After the Gain. And what gain stage did we go with? Well, of course, I'm wearing my Vox Bender t-shirt and cap. So I've got to go with a Vox Bender. Check out this bad boy. Can't go wrong. I've set it fairly aggressive. I've put the bias all the way down. And this is my clean tone. That's quite aggressive, but it does clean up. So how does it sound with the phaser? This is in a block logo mode. Grip logo mode. Right, now let's try it with something a bit cleaner. So we go to neck pickup. Clean it up with guitar's volume. Now the block logo. And now let's see how it sounds for a bit of lead work. Not that I can play lead work. I think it sounds quite angelic when it's rolled back. Especially on the script mode. I do prefer the script mode, I've got to say. Haha, wrong place. So what do we think of fake reds with it? I mean, I'm definitely not playing any Van Halen sounds because I can't play like Van Halen. I can barely play like a 5-year-old who's just started picking up guitar. Because every time I pick up the guitar, I'm like, maybe I could build something. Maybe I could tweak something. However, I've got to say, since having fake red and my black Les Paul custom, I have started picking up the guitar more. I wonder, do other people find that when you get some new gear, you're sort of really keen to learn some new songs or to start playing more? I'm at the point now where I've downloaded loads of lessons to try and learn some new stuff. I haven't done that for years. And I mean years. We're going back to maybe when I was on, I must have been on HMS Monmouth as a lead hand. Last time I learned something new. It's years, like 10, 15 years. And these guitars have inspired me. So, it can only be a good thing. Let me know in the comments if you've got a guitar that's inspired you to pick up and learn something new. I'd love to know. So what did we think? Did the script logo version nail that Eddie Van Halen tone? Did you prefer the Phaser before the gain stage or after the gain stage? If you like that video, you are going to love this video.